Greetings, Ventures! This is Lauren, your guild advisor, and welcome back to Cut Content and Review for DanMachi Season 3, Episode 8. Again, I'll be going over some of the cut content and changes made from adapting what is Volume 10 of the light novel into Episode 8 of the anime. And to keep you guys updated on me, I know I said last week that I felt sick over the week, and I thought it wasn't COVID, and I got tested over the weekend. Turns out I did have COVID. I can't taste or smell anything. The good thing is that I really haven't felt sickly before, having a fever or anything ever since last week. Over the course of this week and last weekend, I felt fine. It's really just my sense of smell and taste that's just not been that great. I took a stick of my deodorant to put right against my nose. Smelled nothing. Nothing I eat really tastes much. It's very faint. I can kind of tell it's there, but not really. Eating pizza was pretty depressing. But anyway, that's me. I'm sure my health isn't going to just drastically worsen all of a sudden. I'm pretty sure I've been through the worst of it, and I'm just gradually recovering. So last week I mentioned that Dix's fate would be in this episode, and it was, because they kind of reordered some scenes last week to end it on that cliffhanger, and you see here that Dix does indeed get killed off by Asterius. I can finally say his name. It was always awkward, saying the bull Xenos, the black Minotaur Asterios. There you go, that's his name. But Dix's death was shortened a tiny bit. Basically, he's running through Knossos trying to get to his base so he can use his healing items because he's currently injured. He senses a presence behind him. He starts running, and he's running through Knossos because he knows the way. But for some reason, he hears a door he didn't open, and that's because, in the light novel at least, Asterios was given that Daedalus key. So instead of appearing from behind Dix keeps running, hears a door open, and then in front of him he senses this dark presence, and it's super dark in Knossos, and Asterios steps out of the darkness in front of Dix, and then that's when Asterios does a little guillotine maneuver, and bye-bye Dix, nice knowing you, not really. So now we go into the situation with Bell ready to fight against Loki Familia. And he shoots off that firebolt into the skies like a type of warning shot, back off, I'm serious about this. The one odd thing is that he shoots it and sheathes his knife in the anime. He just fires the firebolt with his other hand in the light novel, and he still has his knife out. And he actually brandishes his knife towards Loki Familia, the onlookers that are around him, and also his own Familia, basically saying, back off. And I really wish we got to see Bell's expression as he decided to fire the firebolt and then fire it. It's really weird to me, not showing what Bell looked like when he fired that. And the other thing that kind of bothered me is that during this whole entire first half of the episode, it's not just Finn, Reveria, Gareth, Eyes, Tiona, and Bet. The rest of Loki Familia is here during this scene in the light novel, so it's just so weird seeing the scale of these fights just drastically reduced, because it's supposed to involve a lot more people. You see a lot of Xenos come out of Knossos to try and help Bell and Weena, they block the path to them, so Loki Familia has to fight through them. And you see Xenos like Ray and Fia and a Griffin, for example, come out of Knossos, but during the first half of this episode, they're not shown fighting at all. So the scale of all the fighting is drastically reduced. There's also a bit of skipped dialogue between Fells and Ray, where basically Fells is like, why are you doing this? And Ray basically says, listen, if we don't help out Bell and Weena in their time of need, how can we have the right to pursue our own desires of wanting to, be on the surface and live here? And I mentioned earlier that more of Loki Familia is involved during this fight, the lower level adventurers like Cruz and Raul and Anakitty, and Finn is meticulously giving orders to the Familia, saying, Tione, take a squad to engage against the Xenos, and that's when you see Tiona, and Bet jump down. He tells Reveria to prepare a barrier, tells Gareth to prepare a perimeter around the area and secure it. And he also orders some of the magic users to help some of these citizens evacuate the area, because in the light novel, some of the citizens, like, they've never seen Loki Familia like in action before. They're one of the strongest familias in Arario, and most of their fighting is done in the dungeon. So a lot of these onlookers selfishly want to actually watch Loki Familia in action, fighting against these monsters that breached the surface. And there's always the complaint that Eyes doesn't show enough emotion. And in the light novel, she does show a hint of annoyance towards Finn, because Finn actually stops her from jumping down initially to help with the fighting. And like in the anime, he says, "You're our trump card, we're saving you as insurance." Because he has that like pricking sensation in his thumb, which is always an omen that something more is going to happen. So the fighting between Loki Familia and the Xenos begins. Bet doesn't actually fight Gross straight on. He's fighting a troll initially. Like in the anime, Tione is fighting against Leto. The fight is a bit longer, but it kind of ends the same way. Leto realizes that Tione is much stronger than him. He does manage to land a tail swipe on Tione, who wasn't expecting it, and knocks the knives out of her hands. And that's when Tione actually takes Leto's head and then just bashes it into a wall. And it's kind of similar with how they handle it in the anime. And then as for Bet, when he's finished fighting the troll, he then fights against Ray. And it's actually mentioned in the novel that the lower level Loki Familia members are having trouble with Ray because of her sonic waves. Their ears are actually bleeding from it, so Bet manages to indeed take Ray down. And before all this happened, Ray actually made herself bleed and then smeared the blood all over her face to hide her beauty. And after Bet manages to ground Ray, some of that blood gets smeared off her face, and it reveals her more beautiful features. And then Bet actually calls her a looker, and then stomps onto her stomach to knock her out. And that's when Gross gets really mad, seeing how Bet was treating Ray. And then that's when Bet takes out Gross. And then as for Tiona, I just thought it was weird having Let just kind of try to tackle Tiona when she has this massive double-bladed weapon called Urga. In the light novel, Let at least has an axe in his hand and tries to swing it at Tiona. But I did find it humorous seeing Aroru try to fight against Tiona, and then she just kind of flicks her away. And of course, Fells is witnessing all this from afar, and he sees that Loki Familia, and even the lower level Loki Familia members that are involved in this fighting, are easily taking care of the Xenos through teamwork. And that's, of course, when Fells summons that golem, which I thought looked kind of derpy when I saw the golem in the show, but whatever. It's supposed to have this symbol on its head, and this is parts of the problem I have with the show sometimes. Anime is the perfect way to do what is called show, don't tell. Show what's happening and then convey the information through visuals and audio keys. And basically we just have Fel say, "Yes, my golem is made of adamantite, one of the hardest metals in Arario," and then immediately Tiona just rips it in half. And then random explosion, because we're Power Rangers right now, and things explode for no reason. But anyway, initially what happens is the golem appears. Bet and Tione think that it might be related to the Xenos, and they start attacking it, and they notice how hard it is. And that's what I mean by show don't tell. They notice how hard it is. The tips of Tione's knives actually shatter upon trying to hit the golem. That's how they realize it's adamantite. And then this is when Tiona swoops in, twirling her Urga around. Everyone's like, "Oh crap, get out of the way." And they're even ordered to kick the monsters out of the way. They're knocked out on the ground to get them out of Tiona's path, as she slices the golem in half. And she slices it so the upper and lower parts of the body are falling down, but it's still moving because the symbol on its forehead is still there. And then that's when Tiona does indeed slice it again, this time on the symbol, so the golem is no longer functional. And before all this is happening, the golem actually makes some wild swings, because it's very hard for Fells to even control the golem perfectly. And as it's doing these wild swings, it's knocking a lot of the lower level Loki adventurers into the air. And in the novel, while Eyes is like watching Tiona from afar, she's visibly jealous. Like she wants to fight, and she sees Tiona just having the time of her life. And Tiona's just a bundle of joy, always positive. And during all this fighting, as Loki Familia like continues to gain victory after victory against the Xenos, like the onlookers that are watching are actually cheering what's happening. And then, of course, that cheering breaks when Asterios makes that roar. But before that happens, like Welf is actually seeing all this happen and he wants to help. And you see that in the anime, and Lily tries to stop Welf from helping. And in the novel, like, again, I don't know why they keep doing this, but like I mentioned before that Hestia has some good development scenes with Ganesha as they talk about supporting their familias. I said they skipped that earlier on in the anime. And again, they skipped some good development material for Hestia here, where she basically says, no, go ahead and help if you want. You can just put the blame on me. Just say it's the whims of a god that told you that you could go and like help the Xenos here. And the people of Aurario probably won't be as hard on you if they know that you're just acting to like a god's whims. And then the sequence we have with Fels and Gareth and Icarus and Hermes was just so weird in the anime, because they're actually two separate scenes and the anime kind of tries to blend them together. What happens is, of course, Fel's golem plan fails, and then that's when Gareth appears from behind Fels and then asks if Fels is the mastermind. And then here in the anime, it's very strange, like you have this sudden like cloud of dust appear, and then that's when Gareth appears, so you think that Fels is supposed to like be in that same location, then all of a sudden it's Gareth and Icarus, and then Fels is magically teleported to where Hermes is. It's very strange. There's supposed to be two separate scenes where Fels is at first cornered by Gareth, and then it skips to a different scene. And then when they go back to the scene with Gareth and Fels, Icarus shows up and says, hey, it's all me, this is my fault, I'm the mastermind. And then during that distraction, Fels is able to slip away and then meets up with Hermes. He thanks Hermes because Hermes is the one that sent Icarus over there, and Hermes asks for Fels' help. And it makes more sense the way the light novel does it, because when Hermes is trying to convince Fels to help him out with Bel's situation, one of Hermes' arguments is that Asterios has the situation handled, and then Loki Familia is trying to not kill the Xenos, so Fels doesn't really need to be around for this. But of course, during this scene in the anime, Asterios has not appeared yet, so that can't be an argument for Hermes to convince Fels to help Bel. And the weird thing is they like try to frame Lulane as very suspicious, but in the light novel, Fels like straight up says, okay, I'll go ahead with your plan, Hermes, and gives Hermes 3 of those smoke bombs, and then Hermes hands those to Lulane. And I'll comment on the smoke bombs later, because I just thought that was handled oddly. And I mentioned earlier that Welf wants to help out the Xenos, and then Hestia says to use her as an excuse. During that, Mikoto also says that she'll use her gravity magic to like hold down some of the lower level Loki Familia members and ask Haruhime to help with a level boost so she can keep it up for longer, because there are Loki Familia members that Mikoto is not stronger than, because she's level 2 and Loki Familia has a lot of adventurers that are much higher level than her. And of course, that's when Asterios appears. He howls, and that howl makes a ton of people like shudder in fear. You see Welf and Mikoto like on their knees from that howl. A lot of the lower level Loki Familia members that are in that situation, like it's said that they lost the will to fight as they were struggling to just stand up from the sheer force of that howl. And the quote from the light novel is this: "Those unworthy to meet the challenge were immediately rendered motionless. The roar restrained its victims." And in the light novel, Asterios actually attacks Tione first. He doesn't just get Bet out of the way first, and he easily just shatters Tione's knives and then pushes her back. And that's when Bet and Tiona start like double teaming against Asterios. And then Tione gets up pissed off, and she like tries to get Bet and Tiona out of the way. She like goes into this frenzy against Asterios, which you see here in the episode. And what's mentioned in the novel is that as she's like trying to punch Asterios, she's actually like breaking her hands on impact. and she eventually reaches a point to where she actually kicks Asterios in the face, and Asterios is not even fazed by this, and he just takes Tione and then just throws her, and then Tione has to go ahead and catch her later. And while this fighting is happening, not only does Leto like name drop Asterios, he also is like complaining like, geez, you show off, because of course Leto is angry that Asterios is stronger than him. And I just want to say, that is a beautiful smile by Asterios. Beautiful. He is enjoying the fight. And it's mentioned while Tione, and Bet are all fighting together against Asterios, you're like feeling this like sense of deja vu. And that sense of deja vu is of course a reference to Otaro. The three of them actually fought against him in Sororatoria, where they were trying to repel Otaro as Eyes tried to make her way to Belle, who was fighting against the Minotaur. But as the novel makes that reference to Otaro, it actually transitions to that scene with Freya and Otaro watching what is happening and ask if that Minotaur was familiar to Otaro, and he has these doubts about it, and that's all I'll say. So now we get to the part where Asterios uses the magic weapon that shoots down all that lightning. So initially what happens in the novel is that like it's not like the anime where Asterios just like kind of takes it out, stands there, and then does all this like ritual stuff and everyone just watching it happen. What happens in the novel is that Tiona, Bet, and Tione are all fighting him, and he pulls it out as he like swings it down against Tiona's Urga as they're all fighting against each other, and they don't actually know like what it is, but when he does swing it down, that's when like the initial lightning comes. And that first initial lightning strike that happens as a result of him like bashing the weapon against Urga is not as strong as the one you see in the anime, because he actually does it a second time in the novel, but that's all you see in the anime is that second time he uses it. But Bet and the Amazon twins are of course caught up in that initial lightning strike, and then that leaves Asterios enough time to charge up the second one, which is much stronger. And before like he actually swings it right down and all the lightning disperses, Bet actually makes his way to the weapon and like smashes his boot against the magic weapon, because one of the abilities of Bet's boots is being able to absorb magic. So Bet is able to nullify some of the lightning strike, but not all of it. Like you see that it still does enough damage to paralyze Bet, Tiona, and Tione. And in the light novel, of course, like I said, there's more people involved in this fight. So there are tons of adventurers, like all paralyzed. And like it's even mentioned that some of them are like smoldering from being burnt up by the lightning. And the weird thing the anime does, like I get it's for dramatic effect, but for some reason the magic weapon can summon a lightning storm. Like before it was like a partly cloudy day with the blue sky, and then all of a sudden when Asterios uses the magic weapon, the entire place gets cloudy, like it's about to storm. Like a magic weapon doesn't change the weather. And as I mentioned, that lightning strike hurt a lot of adventurers, and it destroyed like houses, and you see all this rubble. And that's what Finn surveys when he's scoping out all this destruction. And that's when he makes the decision, yeah, we can't just capture this one alive. Eyes take care of it. And then that's, of course, when we get that fight between Eyes and Asterios. Now, I do like the majority of the fight with Eyes and Asterios. I do think the way Ariel was handled was a bit awkward, because it's supposed to be this continuous aura of wind that's supposed to surround Eyes. And I get kind of hard to animate like invisible wind, but they do try to like show it through that green and that flows around Eyes. And the thing with how Ariel works is that it basically just amplifies all of Eyes' abilities, like her speed, her power, and that's the special, unique characteristic of her wind. And then during this fight, like Bet and Tiona are like all jealous about Ariel, how crazy strong it makes Eyes. Like it's mentioned that it makes her faster than Bet, who's supposed to be like the fastest adventurer in the Familia. it makes her more powerful than Tiona and her strikes with Urga, and she can strike more frequently than Tione, who uses dual knives. And it's also mentioned that for every strike that Asterios can do against Eyes can do 3 of them. And in the anime, you actually see Hestia say Eyes' name properly for one of the first times. And even in the light novel, it's said that Hestia was just forced to acknowledge that Eyes was worthy of Belle's admiration. Watching this, how could you say she's not? The other weird detail in the anime is that Eyes gets injured. In the light novel, Mori-sensei, the light novel author, continuously says, the wind surrounding Eyes is preventing any blood from getting on her and, harming her image. And not once does she, take a actual scratch from Asterios and actually start bleeding. So I thought that was weird. I guess they just wanted to give Asterios a bone because he is supposed to be this powerful force of reckoning. So at least let him injure Eyes a bit. But what does happen is when you see Eyes make that strike and then Asterios blocks it with his horn, that's not what makes Eyes' hand go numb from the force. But what happens is, yes, he does block Eyes' strike with his horn, but then he follows that up with a strike from his other axe, and makes it go against the saber. It actually breaks through Eyes' wind enchantment and breaks it. She's feeling that in her arm, and she's actually sensing that her hand is numb, and then she looks up and sees Asterios just smiling. He's having a good time. And then that's when Gareth jumps in, and the dialogue is a bit different here from the light novel. Initially, Eyes is kind of annoyed because she wants to fight Asterios alone, and Gareth's hey, tone down that ego. You're endangering people by just wanting to do this yourself, because the longer this fight takes, the more destruction that could be taking place around the area. So better to let Gareth and Finn help out in this and get this resolved as soon as possible. And Asterios is just enjoying the situation. And then that's when these smoke bombs come in. And I just thought, the sound effects they're used here, to me, just sound comical in this very tense scene. I don't know why. And then just the amount of smoke bombs that are used. Originally, it's just 3 spears that Fel's hands to Lulune and Hermes. And Fel's being this crazy item maker, you would think it would make more smoke than just what you see in the anime it's supposed to. He only gave them 3 and it makes a huge amount of smoke. And of course the Xenos recognize Fel's handiwork, and that's when Gross and Ray are supposed to roar, and then Ray using her sound waves. Basically what's happening is that they're preventing Loki Familia from fighting out where everyone is, because the smoke is blocking their vision, and then between Gross's roars and Ray's sonic waves, the Loki Familia can't even place where they are based on hearing because they're blocking their oral senses. So that's when the Xenos are able to get away. And then of course we switch to Belle's situation with Wine. And the weird thing to me, the transition, just look at the sky, the weather. Before, the scene was blue skies, partly cloudy, and then when we transition to Belle chasing Wine, not much time has passed. This is stuff that's supposed to be going on while Loki Familia is fighting, but for some reason it's all of a sudden is super cloudy, because in the novel it actually describes that it's slowly becoming twilight, slowly becoming sunset. Just a weird change of detail. But of course we have Belle chasing after Wine, and Belle actually using his firebolt against other adventurers. And they don't make too much of a note on this. You see some people get angry at Belle, but it's explicitly mentioned in the novel that other citizens are watching Belle do this. The entire town is aware that Belle is attacking adventurers, and he's seen as this selfish adventurer trying to claim this monster for himself when it's clearly endangering other people, other townspeople around him, all for his personal gain. And while he's chasing Wine, there are some adventurers that he notices that are really just blocking the path. They're not actually attacking Wine. And in the light novel, he's slowly realizing that they are being led to a trap, and then in the anime, he just kind of follows Wine right into the trap, not realizing what's going on. But he actually warns Wine, don't go that way, it's a trap, in the light novel. Now, small issue here, I get it. hard production schedule with COVID and everything, though I've said before, like other anime have had to deal with this, and they're not having as much trouble as it seems that DanMachi Season 3 is having with some of the shortcuts I'm seeing being taken place in the production of the show. But in the trap, every single adventure around it is using lightning magic. And in the light novel, it's a mix of like lightning and ice and fire magic, and I get it. It's just easier to animate everyone doing the same thing. But if we think about it realistically, it doesn't make too much sense for every single adventurer to have a lightning magic. Like, some would have fire, some would have ice, but whatever. Now, the one thing that does bother me is having Gran throw the spearhead from so far away from behind Weene, because if you think about it logically, if he did throw it from behind Weene, like what's shown in the anime, that means the spearhead is coming from behind her and then piercing all the way through to the front of her chest, which means that magic stone in her chest should just be completely cracked. But in the show, you see later on, only the front part of the magic stone is cracked, so it doesn't make much sense. Originally what happened in the light novel was Gran was coming from behind Belle and threw it from behind Belle, the spearhead, into Weene, and it comes to Weene's chest from the front, and that makes a lot more sense when Belle pulls it out later in the scene and there's like a small crack in the magic stone. Because if it came from the other way, it doesn't make sense that there's only a small crack. It would be completely shattered if it actually came from behind. And then the weird comical thing that's happening in this tense scene when Belle and Weene are like falling down and Gran is like celebrating that he did it is gross, like just comes down on the Gran like Mario stomping on a Goomba is basically what we see animated. Like, here's Gran, here's Gross, ploop. It just seems like an accidental comical kind of scene in the middle of a very tense situation. Like, what happens is Gross just claws Gran to death, not plop him like a Goomba. I really like the insert song that's used in this scene. It's by Sajo no Hana, and I'll link an actual music video they made for this scene in the description, so you can listen to it on repeat as well. I really like it. In general, I thought the scene was handled well. It's just like, when I was reading it in novel format, like it's explicitly mentioned that like there are like a million light fractals all around when Fells is casting that resurrection spell. So rather than just like what we got here in the anime, like a lot of these like hand-drawn light effects, it seems that JC Staff like really wants to like stick to traditional 2D drawn art when it comes to these effects. Though I really wish that JC Staff had like a CG department or like outsourced something so we could get like effects of the scale of like Ufotable, like they use in Fate Zero, or even A1 pictures that they use in SAO, because those million light fractals that I see mentioned in the novel, like I just think of those CG particle effects look beautiful, and it's not that what we got looked bad. I just thought it could have been so much more. That's just my personal taste. Finally, after 3 failed attempts, JC Staff finally adapts Weene being hugged by Belle. It's like, hey, maybe they were just saving the hug for this grand finale event. I'm like, come on, guys, give me a break. Now, other nitpicky thing, when Weene is like dissolving into ash, I thought it was a weird design decision to like cut to like a shot of just the magic stone and the cracking, and then next shot is like Weene disintegrated into ash blowing through the air. Like, I thought it would have been much more effective. This is my personal, like how I would imagine the scene directed personally. I thought it would be much better just to have it like how the novel does it, where Weene is like gradually just turning into ash, and then the ash just like goes through Belle's fingers and leaves a pile of ash on the ground. I wish they at least kept a pile of ash on the ground with just that jewel from Weene left behind. Now, I know some people will take issue with Weene being resurrected by Fells like immediately after she's supposed to die, and I get that. I even felt some of that while reading the novel. But trust me, guys, trust me, you're gonna like the fact that Weene is alive for what happens in Volume 11. Trust me on that. And the way the resurrection magic works, like you probably got the gist of it, how they explain it in the anime. But basically, the Fells has used this spell continuously and it's never worked once. And this is the first time it's ever worked. It cost all of Fells' mind, so he's like unable to move or do anything after casting this. And he mentions that he always thought that this resurrection spell was just a waste of his slots because each adventurer only has space for 3 magic spells. So this whole time, Fells has been annoyed that he's had this useless spell that's never worked, taking up one of his precious 3 magic slots. But for the first time, he's grateful he had it because it worked on Uine. And the part with the Xenos that bothered me is that it's explicitly mentioned that the Xenos that are with Bell and Fells and Uine, after all of that, they can only be counted like on Bell's fingers. So there's like less than 10 of them around in the light novel, and it's mentioned that there are other Xenos out there that got separated and they're still like separated from the rest of the group. So what needs to happen later is the Xenos need to all gather together. And what's mentioned later on in the novel, volume 10, very interesting where they left it off at, because they like stop a few pages before volume 10 ends. So I'm not sure if they want to address like those last few pages of volume 10 in the next episode or not. But it's explained that the Xenos are currently trapped above ground because they can't get back into the dungeon because the entrance they took from Gnosis is being guarded by Loki Familia now. And of course they can't go back the traditional way because of course the regular entrance to the dungeon is being guarded. So right now the problem is the Xenos are trapped above ground, ironically, because they wanted to reach the surface, but now they're trapped by the surface and need to go back down into the dungeon. And then Fells is having that talk with Bell about how true heroes sometimes are hypocritical. Like Bell was able to make those hard decisions. Like he stood for the values he believed in, even though they weren't the ones that were popular, that were generally accepted to be what is right. So Bell needs to believe he did the right thing, even though people hate him for it. And the thing that bothered me at the very last scene as Bell is walking through Arario, like it's a lot longer in the novel, and it really shows how much the people like of Arario do not like Bell right now. It's explicitly said in the light novel that Bell is like walking down with his head down to like try to avoid attention, but there are people that notice him and like insult him, make fun of him, are angry at him for what he did, but he still wants to go to Daedalus Street because he wants to see the aftermath of what his decisions caused. And what he sees is like the stone pavement all ruined, like it was ripped up. He sees injured adventurers from the fights against the Xenos and like Asterios and all the lightning. He sees all of that. And he spots Hestia Familia, and he sees that Lily and Haruhime like look ill, and his heart aches because of that. He sees eyes looking at him from afar with the rest of Loki Familia giving him this stare. And that's when Aina spots him. Aina calls out to Bell. He doesn't call out to Aina. I don't think Bell is in the state of mind to where he actually wants to call out to Aina right now like he does in the anime. Aina spots him, calls out to Bell, and then of course that's when she asks Bell if he really did all of this selfishly. And of course Bell lies to her because he wants to protect the Xenos and Uine. And you see Aina is just not having it. She doesn't believe it. She's hugging him in tears, and Bell has that voice in his head again from his grandfather where it's basically saying you need to hug a woman when she's crying. And Bell like raises his arms, but then he makes them fall to his side because he just can't do it because he's the one that made Aina cry. What Bell decided to do in these past few episodes is what caused all of this to happen. If he just left Uine to get killed by Loki Familia from the very beginning, none of this destruction would have happened. But of course, Bell, being the hypocritical hero, would not let that happen. And the townspeople, Loki Familia and Hestia, are all watching this scene with Aina and Bell, and Bell just not knowing what to do and looking up to the sky. Now I said the anime leaves off like a few pages from the end of volume 10, And a lot of it is a conversation between Hermes and Uranos, and that's actually covered in a side story in the mobile game, and you can watch that on Mediocre's channel or by downloading the danmemo game. And you guys know how I feel about this, how we put the skip content in the game when I'm like, maybe you should have given the anime 2 cores. But the gist of it is Uranos and Hermes have this conversation about the past events. Most of it was pinned on Loki Familia for the blame on the entire situation, and Hermes gets permission from Uranos to basically take control of the Xenos situation because Hermes really wants Bell to be this hero, so he's going to try and like find a way somehow to get Bell to be this hero. And Uranos like wonders why Hermes is so interested in Bell, and then Hermes kind of like says, well, Bell is kind of like Zeus's final parting gift. And Uranos is like, huh? And then he basically like, okay, Hermes, I'll let you handle this. And then there's one more scene from Volume 10, which I'm not sure they'll adapt or not. But basically, there's this scene between Ganesha and Icarus. And basically, Icarus is being exiled from Rario, and they're making this huge event where other people, like the townspeople, are watching Icarus leave the city from the North Gate, and they want to make a big event of this to pin all the blame on Loki Familia. But yeah, that's the episode. My general thoughts, I wasn't too high on the first half of the episode because they really toned down the scale of what was happening. They only showed like the executives, Loki Familia. They're not showing like the actual fighting between the other Xenos. Like you see Fia, you see a Griffin, you see Ray. You don't see them fighting at all in the anime, but they are fighting against the lower level Loki Familia adventurers and all of that. I did like the fight between Asterios and Eyes. Thought what they did with Gran was really weird, but I really liked the insert song, and I do like how it was directed with Bellowine in general, though you guys know my little nitpicks there. And we'll see what happens with the rest of the season, because we're getting Volume 11 adapted into 4 episodes. Again, the longest of the 3 Xenos arc volumes being adapted into 4 episodes. Volume 10 got like 4.5 episodes to work with, so very strange to me. We'll just have to embrace whatever it brings. Again, I'll always have the novels to read. That version of the story will always be intact, no matter what the anime does. But I'm curious to see what you guys thought about the episode. How did the light novel readers think about it? How did you anime onlys think about it? Did you think the scale of the fighting was quite small for what was supposed to be a big deal? Like, I'm curious about that, because that to me was like the most apparent thing. And then the weird weather change from like blue sky, partly cloudy, to all of a sudden it's stormy kind of weather. Weird to me. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more DanMachi content, go ahead, like the video, sub to the channel, follow my Twitter, and join my Discord. And as always, continue enjoying your time adventuring Rario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out. 渦を巻く雨雲から差し込んだまっすぐ夏よ